This
going
conference will now be recorded.
we're going to be adding this to, maybe we'll put the video online, but I was planning on putting a blog post together based on what we discuss here. So you'll see me reading some questions off of a tablet here, and I'll also be making notes. So if I'm looking away or distracted, I'm just making notes and that kind of thing. So my first question was, and if it's okay, guys, I'm probably going to defer to Ro first because he's probably being in the Hall of Fame. I'm not in the Hall of Fame, and I don't know if anybody else is, but he's also an Olympic level coach. So I thought I'd hear what his comments were, and then we'll just kind of go around and see where the comments lead us. There's not a big structure here. It's just the questions that I emailed you guys the other day. So the first question is, what does make a great coach? What qualities, or what do you, if you were to say that guy is a great coach, that means what?
You know, somebody asked me about this actually in the spring, and we sat down with a couple of friends of mine on a pad of paper, kind of a low-tech group, and started listing, and it turned into a huge list. You know, from some obvious things like a depth of knowledge of your particular activity, whether it's chess or fencing or basketball, to in the physical, the sports that are, you know, physicality, having the technical ability to, if not compete at an elite level, which I don't believe is necessary, but to model so that they can see what it's supposed to look like. So you can show the technique at a level that's going to be easily comprehensible. Being able to explain complex subjects sometimes in a simpler way. And we also, just a quick little segue, we also thought that it might be that you required a slightly different skill set to work with children than with teenagers, and certainly than adults. In all the categories, we thought patience, a sense of humor. My coach used to always say that nothing serious could be accomplished without a sense of humor. That was, and he was incredibly strict and fairly demanding, but he could disarm it all with one comment. And certainly one of the coaches I worked with as a kid was just, what I always remember of him was his laugh, but we learned a ton. But being with him was very enjoyable. So sense of humor, patience, depth of knowledge, the ability to communicate well and communicate those somewhat complex tasks into a simpler format, especially with kids. The ability to understand the fundamentals of your particular sport. And the ability to understand your students, which is sometimes the most difficult part.
Well, Bruce, do you have any comments on that, or Nathan? What do you think, Bruce? Do you like that list that Rose put together with his other expert coaches?
I do. It's a good, comprehensive list. If I was to add one thing to it, it would be love what you're doing. If you love what you're doing, you will be great at it.
That's good.
Nathan, how about you? Did you have any thoughts as you were listening?
Well, I agree with that. I try to add some humor in my classes. One comment I like to make is when I'm showing a chess game, I'll have like a pawn attack a queen or something, and I'll say, I'm hoping my opponent doesn't see that. And it makes the students all laugh, and they say, he'll see it.
Yeah, right. He lost his queen. He'll see it. Yeah, right.
So it's good to add some humor. And also, I'm glad that Bruce made the comment, love what you do, because I even mentioned that in the surprise meeting yesterday when you asked me what makes me a good coach. I said, I love what I do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I enjoy teaching kids chess. Chess is a healthy game. It's good for their thinking processes. So parents like kids learning chess, and so I enjoy teaching it to them.
Awesome. Just a quick note, I see Mark and John are logged in, but Mark and John, if you can't get your audio working, you can type in messages into the chat or questions, and I can share those comments or questions with the rest of the group. The next question I have on my list is if you could name a coach, either that you know personally, that's maybe been a mentor, or that you know of in your community, or name a well-known coach, a Vince Lombardi type, for instance, and that you aspire to. So name a coach that you aspire to be like, and what about that coach attracts you to wanting to be more like that coach? So again, I'll go to Ro first.
For me, none of you will have heard of him, and there's no reason for you to have. My choice would have to be Zbigniew Tchaikovsky. I was lucky enough to start to work with him when I was in my 20s. He is now 97 and hitting on all his cylinders. Heard from him a couple of weeks ago. And his career has been kind of amazing. He's a World War II vet. And finished, after World War II, studied medicine in Scotland and decided he didn't want to be a doctor. He wanted to bring scientific methodology to the training of fencing. And there was just a quick story to explain one of the reasons I would choose him. Is I was sitting at a World Cup. There was a break in the action, and I was sort of sitting off to one side where I was hoping to be left alone. And he just sort of showed up next to me, and he picked up talking where the last lecture left off. And after he lectured me, gave me a 45-minute lecture like we were in a classroom about some topic. He gave me a hug and walked off. And one of the other national coaches sat down next to me and said, "He was your coach?" And I said, "Yes, he taught me so much that he made my career possible." And he said, "Mine too." And he started pointing at national coaches in the room, and his, and his, and his, and his. And it was maybe 85 to 90% of the national coaches in that room from all over the world had been amazing fingerprints to put on their game.
Yeah. That mentorship, I think, is something that, when you can be a coach with a legacy, and the legacy kind of carries on through the sport or through the profession. And I'm more of a student of football, and so I recently watched a biography on YouTube about Bill Walsh and all of the coaches that worked underneath him, and all of those coaches that went on. It was like Brian Billick, Mike Holmgren, and there was like 4 or 5 others that John Gruden, I think, worked under him, and they all went on to have successful coaching careers themselves. So yeah, I think that mentorship is a great piece of that. Kamau, I'm going to turn to you. Do you have a coach that you aspire to be like, or who inspires you?
Yeah, I would say my football coach. I mean, my football coach and my track coach, Joe Labuda and Dale Dalkey at Menominee High. I don't think Dale's doing track anymore, but Joe Labuda, I believe, is retiring here pretty soon. But he came from the University of Miami, where he was the offensive coordinator. He moved up to this small town in Wisconsin and started coaching our high school team, and took, really what was a non-existent football program into 6 or 7 straight years of going to state, 5 state championships. He just got done sending his own son and 2 other players to D1 schools. I'm sure he has a list of D1 athletes that had success. There were a couple pros that came out of that program. And so I learned a great deal from him. Of course, this is like a different era of coaching when it comes to like football in particular, and the culture around football. Like one of the most interesting things is that now, as he's gotten older, my son still goes to his football camp. And, I talked to him about this, just some of the stuff that he used to do being a coach now, how I've, kind of transferred some of his lessons in a different methodology, because it's like I have to. I couldn't grab kids by the face mask and kick them and throw them to the ground or that kind of stuff. But one of the things that he talked about is like he thinks about like our team in particular. We won state, And he thinks about some of the things that happened in the course of that season, from not being ranked to being ranked #1 in the state, and how he would do things differently now because he's older and he slowed down a little bit, and how he even kind of chuckles about how like some of the stuff that he would do to us, he couldn't get away with anymore. So he's had to tone it down a lot.
Sure.
And then like with Dale Dalkey, I think so. Labuda had a focus on team building, right? He was a team builder. Yeah, he was a strategist to a certain extent, but like what he focused on was getting the most out of every player. So stressing the idea that like even in practice, players who don't get a lot of playing time have an integral role in our team success. And I think that that's something that like, from business to sports, whatever, to chess, whatever it might be, that each individual player has a role, and it helps our team improve. Dale Dalkey was more of a strategist, and he wanted to be scientific about his approach to sprinting, jumping, hurdles. Being a track coach, there's a lot of moving parts, and he was more focused on the fundamentals of kinesiology, right, and how your body works, how you take care of your body. And so I take things from that. But in reality, like I meet coaches every day where there's some element of what they do that I learn from and respect, right? Like Bruce has a different methodology in fencing than I do. Chris did as well. And then Ro, like I'm lucky enough to work with Ro and be mentored by him. I call him my mentor. So there's lots of people that that I'm learning new elements to respect. So yeah, that's kind of my piece.
I'd like to ask Nathan about this. Nathan, you were a high school baseball player, but you're also, if I remember correctly, you didn't start playing chess until you were a middle teenager, and you took to it. I don't know who coached you in chess.
Well, I did not have a coach.
Yeah, so that's interesting.
I guess I was basically my own coach. I did get some books on some of the great players, so in some respects, they would be my coach.
So is there then a chess coach out there that you know of that since I don't know if that happens in the chess world as much as in other activities or sports? Is there a chess coach that you aspire to be like? Hey, well, like, you know what? I really want to be like Susan Polgar and what she's done with, was it St. Louis University? I can't remember where she coaches.
I guess if there was a coach that I aspired to be like, it'd be Edward Zelkind, a local coach, because he's had great success. Some of his students have made it to the master level.
Edward Zelkind, I believe one of his students was Boris Gelfand. Is that right?
That is correct. And Boris Gelfand was a candidate for the World Championship.
Yeah, he played Anand.
He played Viswanathan Anand in the World Chess Championship in 2012.
Yeah. So Edward Zelkind is a pretty like chess royalty in the state of Minnesota. So yeah.
Obviously, he's a good coach.
Yeah. So my next question is, why is good coaching important? Why? I mean, I coach a lot of Pee Wee League kind of things and really introductory things for my kids, and I don't have the depth of knowledge that Ro has. What I have in baseball isn't even close to what Ro has in fencing. But why is it important to have a good coach in those youth sports, middle school, high school? Just curious, why is it important? Ro?
But, and this is sort of trite answer, but I think it's important that those kids enjoy it. I think it's important that they come away with something from the sport. I really want everyone who comes through the front doors of my gym to love fencing, to have a great experience. I think that the greatest salute that we get as coaches down there in the dungeon are the numbers of kids who come back to see us. It's not the medals. Those are cool. Absolutely. I won't deny that. But spring comes and we get this tour group after tour group of kids who aren't kids anymore, who've come back to say hello because they're back in town for a little while. And they come in and they're always so happy to see the gym, and they talk about what it was like to grow up in that gym. And that's a big reward. It says that we have accomplished something, that we have touched someone's life. And I think if you're a good coach, that's one of the things that you should find to be important. You can make a difference through sport. You can make a difference through other ways. But this is our path. It's important to us.
Bruce, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, sure. All of that, yeah, is very relevant. Excellent points. But also, you know the way I feel, Chet. You know, the opportunity to be a positive influence in the life of a child is fantastic. And also bringing out the best in each individual child, or adults, if you're, you know, just bringing out the best in people. You know, that's also wonderful accomplishments.
And that comment, Bruce, sparked, I didn't write this question down, but I'd be curious, you know, how important is it for a coach to expect more from his kids? And I'll turn it to Kamau first. Well, how important is it for a coach not to just accept the kids at their current level and say, you can do better, I know what you can do, or is that not important? I don't know. I'm just kind of opening it up.
Well, I think it's important. You know, I in almost all of my classes, I have a coach 'em up where it's about effort, and I talk about how effort is a battle between you and yourself, and that can pose itself in lots of different ways, from relationship to when you're out applying for colleges to these things are all transferable. And I give them examples of what effort looks like, and that everybody has a voice in their head that says, I don't really have to run harder. I don't really have to do this drill as hard as I want. As a coach, my job is to be able to kind of determine whether or not you're trying or giving it 100%. And no matter how good of a coach I am, I can never truly know if you're giving me 100% of your effort. Only you know that. And that lesson is transferable to, like I said, relationship, business, how you apply yourself in math, science, social studies. So to tie it back to why I believe good coaching is important is because, you know, coaching and mentorship are so closely tied that my goal is that I'm creating lifelong learners. I'm creating lifelong lessons that they take into how they behave as a father, a husband, a business partner. You know, that these lessons that we learn in youth sports are so crucial because they mimic life into adulthood. So that's kind of my piece. I talk a great deal about effort.
That's awesome. I mean, we're kind of hearing similar things from Ro and Bruce, and you know, Ro just said you can make a difference through sport, and Bruce is bringing out the best in your students, and Kamau's saying, you know, creating lifelong messages and methods for your students.
Mm-hmm.
That's all good. I mean, that's sport at its best. I feel. Then now I'm going to move on to a system. Ro, you had mentioned, what's his Tchaikovsky? What's his first name?
Zbigniew.
Zbigniew. Could you spell that?
Z-B-E, let's see, Zbigniew, Z-E-B, it's like a spelling contest.
Zbigniew. That's good enough. I got it.
Z-I-G-N-I-E-W.
Oh, W. Okay. Got it. All right. So you mentioned that, you know, he was a doctor, and then he wanted to apply the methodology, scientific methodology, to the sport of fencing. And so one of the questions I had was, you know, how important is it to have the methodology, a system? And I used John Wooden as an example. He would tell his UCLA players, you know what, I've got you for 90 minutes, and I will expect 100% effort out of you for 90 minutes. And you will be hustling that entire time. At the 91st minute, we're done, and you're on your way to the showers. And he kept that promise to them, and they gave him that effort. Obviously, 10 national titles, 8 in a row, an amazing coach. So I was just curious, Ro, how important is it to have a system for coaching?
I think for me, it's very important to have an idea. I'm all about, I have to admit, I'm a structure person. I like practice to be structured. I like training to be structured. I tend to work with top athletes working on a cycle. We're going to do one thing at the end of the summer, and it's totally different what we're going to be doing at the peak of the competitive season. So being able to plan, especially at that level, being able to structure practice, because it's true, you get them for 90 minutes or you get them for 2 hours, 3 days a week, and that's it. And the clock is ticking. So being able to maximize the time I'm in the gym with those athletes is something I very much believe in. I try not to waste much time.
So what system, so we've talked about your 20-20-20 system for an hour, 20 minutes of, I believe it's footwork, then 20 minutes of blade work, and 20 minutes of bouting. Am I remembering it correctly?
Yeah, that's what we do. And if we're running an hour and a half class, we do half-hour blocks instead of 20-minute blocks. But it's the same idea. And it's flexible enough that if I'm working on something and it looks like we need to go a little longer with that, I can take time from something else and slide it over. But I'm very aware of how much time I've got in that with that group at that time.
You've also, there's a phrase you have to do with a stopwatch and a coach. I can't quite find it though. Do you remember it?
The kids came up with that one, so they should always be afraid of a coach with a stopwatch.
Always be afraid of a coach with a stopwatch.
It always means we're going to do, we're going to do this for 3 minutes, but there's no stopping. So it'll be 3 minutes of following and 3 minutes of some sort of footwork game, or 3 minutes with an acceleration minute at the end, or I'll change, but they're going to be going constantly for X amount of time until I say halt, and they're going to get a minute break, and then they're doing it over again.
Yeah. And you know, Bruce, I mean, you assisted Ro last summer in his summer camp, and both of my sons were in that camp, and I've never seen him sweat that much. So how did you feel about that, Ro, when you were watching that? And Bruce, how did you feel about that when you were watching Ro's system at work?
Oh, well, watching, okay. I did a lot of watching, a lot of observing, and of course, with Ro, it's pretty much a standard modus operandi. In the fencing world, that's what I've observed. It's all laid out and it has a logical progression. Okay, and yeah, you only have so much time. So you've got to cram as much in as you can, but within reason. You don't want to overload the students with too much stuff. But like I say, it's laid out. He's got a logical progression. It was A, B, C, D, right along the line, and the kids can absorb it. Like I say, it I believe for most students, it's easily learnable. The information that he's presents to them. Like I say, he doesn't overload them with too much stuff. And of course it's the way he presents it. It's good. He willingly admits I don't have a sense of humor, but he does, and you can tell the kids enjoy his class. And if the kids are enjoying it, if it's fun, then they learn that much easier and that much quicker. When you make it difficult for them, it turns them off. And so keeping it fun, enjoyable, they just suck it right up.
Awesome. Nathan, I'm going to turn to you again with chess. We've talked about a coach with a stopwatch and a system. Do you have a system that you've created? We've got our system within chess, and I'm just curious how you systematize your classes, if at all. Maybe you don't. Maybe chess is a little more loosey-goosey. I'm just curious what you would think.
Well, first off, I want them to have fun. So I run the chess class very similar to how I would organize at an adult chess club. with the exception being that I'm also there to teach. So I add that component to it. But since the adult chess club is fun to be there, we've got good attendance, I thought that would be a good way of doing things. I'll run it like a chess club, but I'll have the component where I'll do a lecture and I'll teach before they play. So that's basically the way I organize my chess class. Is I run it just like an adult chess club, except that I throw in the teaching component. So they play one game, it'll be a tournament game, and
So in your classes, one of your primary things is make sure that they're engaged in having fun. And then you know that they're there to play chess. And you, different from many coaches, you actually make every game count in your class. So if this at a certain point, so let's say starting in week 4, you actually start your in-class tournament earlier in the session and kind of run it so every time they play, that result counts towards the tournament standings. Is that correct?
yes, because if I try to do a tournament in just like the last 2 classes, I find I just don't have enough time because they like to use time. So a chess game could potentially go 30 minutes and even slightly longer in some cases. So I don't really have, it's not convenient for me to run a tournament the last 2 chess classes. So I just have them play one game each chess class, and it all counts towards the tournament. And so when they finish their chess game, now they can do other things. They can do some puzzles. I actually bring my opening book, Chess Openings for Kids, featuring 50 mighty openings, and I tell them if they can show me one opening, they'll get an extra chess dollar for that. Yeah. So I'll have some students that'll study openings after their chess game, and they'll show me 3 or 4 different openings, and I'll give them 3 or 4 chess dollars for that.
Yeah, so you have a structure of lecture. I've seen many of your classes, and you're almost always doing a lecture at the beginning of the class, and then they'll go into chess play. So you've got the teach it, play it, and then maybe the practice it portion comes after they play, where they're doing puzzles and learning openings and things like that. So
correct.
One of the tricks with I think chess is that the games can last very long. So an hour-long class can contain just one chess game between 2 kids, and they could use up an entire hour in some cases. So that's rare, but it can happen. So then my follow-up question was is kind of what Nathan and I are talking about, is can you improvise within that system? And so when you got your lesson plan for that day, and you find out, for instance, this was what I was planning on teaching, but I've changed my mind. Is it okay to do that, or is it okay to say we're doing 35 minutes about it? Or go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Absolutely. And I do it all the time. I did it on Wednesday. I started with a children's group with one idea, and they were struggling with it a little bit, so I approached it from a different direction, and I taught the same thing 3 times. Because my first approach to it was clearly wrong. If the whole class is not getting it, then it's not them, it's me. And I came back around and tried it from a different direction, and a couple of light bulbs went on, and I thought, okay, one more try, and we did the same thing once more, and they all got it. And my only question is, why did it take me 3 attempts? But my first idea was not going anywhere, and I had to do it a different way or give up. And I wasn't going to give up.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, and I've learned a lot just from speaking with Ro over the years, and I try to incorporate it into my baseball coaching or robotics coaching, whatever I happen to be doing. And so being able to change the way you're teaching and be like, okay, nobody's understanding the 4-move checkmate, for instance, right now. I've got to adjust how I'm coaching this or whatever. So, and Kamau, do you find that you do the same thing? Do you kind of improvise around where the students are at or how they're getting things, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's really my job to determine like what the level of my class is, and so I have to be really I have to be flexible, because when I coach kindergarten basketball versus my middle school JV team, you're going to get a considerably different Coach Wilkins, right? Where kindergarten I might be like more bubbly and say funny things and just work on a couple of drills, where middle school takes a different character. So like the practice progression has to change within that, right? And it's the same for fencing. I focus a lot on athletic development when I'm working on any of my sports, right? That I try and consistently add agilities, plyometrics, strength routine as a part of every one of my practices, no matter what the sport, because I believe that's transferable into whatever they're doing.
Right.
But that part that Ro was talking about, of the progression as it leads to competition, I always talk to my fencers and my basketball players about, we have 6 hours to get ready for the tournament. That's all more we're going to see each other. Yeah, it's 6 weeks, but we have 6 hours. So when we come here to practice, we're getting ready. We're thinking about getting ready for the tournament, right? And kind of creating that thought in their mind, and a progression as a coach, right? Where things change. The beginning of the practice for that six session period, we're going to spend a lot more time on getting in shape, getting strong, getting fast, being more agile. And then as we get closer to tournament time, we're working on the fundamentals, footwork, swordsmanship, those kind of things. And then as we get closer, and now we're even closer to tournament time, now we're really focusing on refining all those parts, right? We're going to make sure that we're bouting well, we're working on the fundamentals. And that comes from my track background, right? Because track is very much, I have 10 seconds to be at my best, right? To run my 100, my diet has to be perfect. My workout, I can't be sore. My workout has to be perfect. And if I'm going to run the 10.5, right, then I have to be primed at that very moment. And it's a month and a half away. Regionals is a month and a half away. Sectional state is a month and a half away. So as I coach, I try and coach my kids so they start to understand that preparation phase, that we're all looking for a goal. There's a tangible thing that we're working on to be our best at the singular moment. So that's kind of how I tailored my progression, and it depends on the group of kids.
And I have to interrupt the line of thought here for a second. Did you really run a 10.5 in high school?
Yeah.
How did that rank in state? Because that would have I think that would have won the state of Minnesota back in when I was in high school.
It was unfortunate for me because that was my junior year, and then I got hurt in football because I was playing football, because in order to play basketball, you had to be like a football player. Luckily, I won state at football, but I hurt myself really badly. But I think at that time I was about 7th fastest in the state. I was in a period of time where Wisconsin track was like pretty incredible. So yeah, but I was pretty fast. I'm not anymore.
Well, that happens, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's called age.
Yeah.
So one of the coaches that I have, we've mentioned earlier about, a depth of knowledge in the discipline and how important that is. And, obviously each of you has a superior depth of knowledge in a primary activity or 2 or 3. But some of our coaches either have a depth of knowledge of the activity but no coaching experience, or they have coaching experience but not the same level of knowledge in the subject. And I'll give you me as an example. I've been coaching kids for 19 years now. I know that doesn't sound like a ton to some of you, but and I'm a hobby chess player though. So Nathan, well, I'll come to Nathan second if it's okay. I'll go to Ro first, because I'll mention that I fenced in college in a Phi Ed class, and I fenced at a prep school. The Air Force colonel showed us some of the ropes, And, you know, I don't remember anybody talking about things like right of way, but, you know, and it was back in the day where I held my arm like this. So the question is, how important then is the depth of knowledge? How would you rank that? It was the first thing you mentioned when we asked that initial question. So,
You know, I think it depends in part on what age you're working with. The older they are, the more I think it's necessary to have a good depth of knowledge, because they're going to be getting stronger, and you're going to have to be able to continually instruct them and continually challenge them to keep that progression moving forward. I think with younger children, they're doing much more basic technical actions, and so you don't have to have an active concept of counter time. You need to be able to put them on guard and teach them to move and make good parries in a non-punitive and positive setting, and having those greater coaching skills is going to cause those kids to want to keep going.
yeah.
Once they're fully committed, then you're starting to teach more difficult technical concepts and tactical concepts, and you need to know them and at least be familiar with them. But when you're starting, you need to be, I think the best coach in the world is the one who should be, well, I went teaching my children's classes. You know, the person who teaches most of our children's classes, I think, is better at it than I am. She's great with kids. They adore her, and she loves being there. And I wish I was as comfortable as she is after all these years. I mean, she is really good with them. So I think the best coach should be the one teaching the youngest group.
Nathan, I'll ask you a similar question. So I was kind of leaning towards saying, you know, I was a hobby chess player before I started coaching, and I've learned more about chess through coaching and through the curriculum that SEMA has developed, essentially. So how important, and you have a very deep knowledge base with chess, and it continues to grow. So how would you weigh the importance of that for, you know, maybe a newer coach that's coming on board with Youth Enrichment League?
How would I weigh my experience?
Well, how would you weigh depth of knowledge of chess, and how important is that for being a youth coach? And using the example of you being a state champion and being a great coach, and me being a hobby chess player, but having lots of years of experience coaching.
So in chess, a little strategy can go a long ways. So most of my students are heading towards being a hobby player rather than a professional. As a matter of fact, I don't think I have any students who might be a professional chess player, because that's like a rare talent.
Right.
So I coach them to be a good, solid player, because chess is more fun if you know strategy.
Mm-hmm.
So
it sounds like you feel it's pretty important to understand that strategy so you can show them. And certainly, I mean, from my experience, guys, when my kids go up against Nathan's kids, well, Nathan comes out on the top of those contests. So.
And like I said, a little strategy goes a long way. So if I just teach them the basics, bring out your knights and bishops right away, control the center, castle early, then that'll go a long ways, and they'll become one of the top players for their age, and it'll build their self-esteem. They'll enjoy chess more as they develop their play, and they'll have a lifelong hobby.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mark isn't able to connect with audio yet, so I'm pointing at my other screen. But Coach Mark Ball and I have talked a number of times, and he has told me in the past that he's taught the rook ladder lesson like 4 times a year to the same group of kids, because he wants them to get that if they get that. And now he's, you know, started developing more opening theory for his students as well. So yeah, so sometimes it's just drilling the basics, knights out, bishops out, control the center, things like that. The next question, I only have a couple more questions left here, and we're close on time. The next question I had is, how do developing, with this in mind, what we've just discussed, how do developing coaches develop the skills to be able to coach at a higher level? Or am I at my limit? Or how would you suggest that someone like me, who's a hobby chess player, a beginning fencer, how would I be able to coach at, let's say, a 5th grade or middle school level for those activities, Ro?
Yeah, I think that knowledge of a sport or knowledge of chess, important tactical games, is something you can learn. I think most coaches who are really dedicated do continuing education all the time. I know at any given tournament that I'm at, a big one, if I get a break, I'm watching other guys give lessons. I'm watching what other people are doing. I will ask questions just like I used to, saying, "Wow, that's really interesting. What made, how do you work that?" And get an answer. I'm always trying to learn from my colleagues. I just bought one of Tchaikovsky, has a relatively new book out that just was translated from Polish to English. And so I bought it, and I've been plowing my way through it. It's not light reading. But for me, there's always continuing education. I'm always trying to learn something.
So the concept of being a learning coach, perhaps?
Yeah, very much.
And you feel that, with that you can develop and be able to give your kids that are advancing but want to stick with you, you can give them more.
I absolutely do. We have frequently tell kids that when they lose, go watch the person who beat you. Don't be upset. Go see what is going to happen next. Go see how someone else deals with it. I do it too. If we've just lost, okay, how could I have made that better? What do we need to work on? It might be not just something he needs to work on, it might be something I need to work on. I had a friend of mine sitting next to me on a plane coming back from a large multi-event competition, and he was really quiet. And he finally looked at me and said, "So have you ever had a really good idea and everybody works on it and works on it and works on it, and they go to the competition and they all get killed?" Yeah, and then he was quiet the rest of the flight, and he went back and reevaluated what he was doing and went and talked to other coaches and studied video and found a different way to teach something. It was continuing education on a basis of doing it yourself, but I certainly look for those opportunities.
Yeah, Kamau actually mentioned it earlier. He mentioned that, he's observed Bruce and Ro coach, and that he's picked up things from them. And Bruce, I'd like to hear what you would have to say about this subject, about how you think a coach could develop skills or be a learning coach. Just your thoughts on that.
Well, of course, life itself is a learning experience. We all of us, whether we admit it or not or realize it or not, we're learning things every day. And of course, coaches with sports, whatever you're talking about, whether it's fencing, football, whatever, it's constantly changing. Just look at the past, the sports, in the past and present day. Things are changing. People are changing. Techniques are changing. There's so many things that are changing, and you've got to keep up with that. You've got whether your books, chess books, like Nathan was talking about. The internet is obviously a great source of information in the information age. We just have to keep evolving with our learning and keep up with whatever we're teaching. All good teachers do it. Whether they teach during the school year and then they take the summer off, sabbatical or what have you, and go and learn more. It's all about learning. We just have to just keep learning, and then we pass along what we learn to the kids, and when it or our students, whether it's kids or adults, and of course, understanding that. Well, first of all, I have to say this. As teachers, we're all closet actors, and we love being on stage. And when we're out there, we're on stage. When we're teaching, and our audience is our students, and of course, understanding that. Everybody listens the same. We all have two ears and we all listen the same, but we all hear differently. As witnessed by, remember that game as a kid, telephone? where it's one would start at one end and then the kids would whisper it all the way down to the other end of the line, and the message was usually quite different. When everybody listens the same but hears differently. And so if we realize that, okay, and can take that into account with our teaching, and pay attention to that, I think that makes us, would make us, better teachers if we understand, okay, that we may sometimes have to, go individually to student and ensure that they are hearing us, our message, and are understanding it the way we are teaching it.
Bruce, I'm sorry, go ahead, Kamau.
So like one of the things that I look at as coaching is that it's part of my job to continually to be at the top of my knowledge, to be at the top of my understanding of how to coach a sport. And I've talked to my son about this. I've talked to my players about the idea of like, Ro actually joined us like really at a time where I was really starting to get overwhelmed, where my kids were getting older. They were in that middle school age group, and I just flatly didn't know enough about swordsmanship. I didn't know the quadrants. I didn't know 4-6. I didn't know these things. And as much as I utilize YouTube and push myself to be a better coach, it really took a Ro to help me be able to match my students. Otherwise, I was starting to tell my students, you might want to, you might consider finding another coach because you're starting to pass me up. And I felt like that's like a legitimate, concern for them. Asher, my chess master, he's like 12th in the state. I've told him, he's well beyond like what I can give him. So I talked to his parents about, hey, you might want to find like a private instructor, and they did. And so they have like a go-to meeting with a private instructor. But to the idea of, whether or not you need to be an expert or have participated in a sport, I didn't know fencing. There was no fencing in Menominee High in 1996,
Or Owatonna for that matter, right, Ro?
No, in 1976.
But like things from other skill sets are transferable. And I talked to that like new hires and teachers with that, we have resources, and our job is to utilize those resources. Now I've had tons of success, but I never look at my coaching as something that's for my personal accolade. The Olympic Committee's not coming and knocking on my door because I have a bunch of 5th grade championships. So I talk to my kids about the idea that, that my job is to nurture their success. That's how I win. The medals and all that stuff are cool, but I don't really pay a ton of attention to winning and losing. I care more about my players' development. That's how I win. Now, do I want to beat Ro's kids? Yes, absolutely. But after matches, I still, I need to talk to Ro about like, well, why did Mateo lose that? What does Ben need to do better? And I look at those losses. It was my responsibility. Fencing's a lot like track in that I have the 6 hours to work with them, right? And then we go to tournament, and I'm like, let's see what happens, right? And then they have to execute. So in that period of time, like I better be at the top of my game to be able to get these kids ready to execute. It's not like basketball where I can make constant adjustments. All right, timeout, right? Timeout. Let's run a press. We're going to stop this point guard. He's killing us. We're going to press him, make him turn the ball over. Fencing is, I better have taught these children how to execute, be pre-game, because then it's hands off. I just got to watch, and it's so different. It's nerve-wracking. And then when they don't perform well, that's a reflection on me. It's not a reflection on my kid. I didn't give him the tools he needed or she needed, right? So that's kind of my take on it.
Great, thanks, Kamau. Any thoughts on that? Before I move on to the final point?
Hey, Chet, can you hear me?
Oh, there's Mark. Now I can hear you. Hi, Mark.
Hi.
Mark.
I've never done this meeting thing before. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add something to your question about do you need to be really good at your subject in order to coach it? I was privileged to have the state champion 8th grader this year in math. I think I'm a better math coach than I am chess, to be honest with you. And I've had a number of math students where I really felt like the kid was smarter than me, but I was able to give him good guidance and keep his attitude right, even though I think the kid was smarter than me. So I think a lot of coaching, you know, you want to know as much as you can about the subject, but I don't think that's totally necessary. I think you can be, what did you call yourself, a hobby chess player? That's kind of what I am. I think you can be a hobby chess player and coach kids and teach them how to be good chess players.
Could you share the thing that you wrote about Usain Bolt?
Oh, yes. You know, when you're talking about, you know, all these coaches are bringing up the fact that you might have had a kid who was almost better than you or is even better than you. Usain Bolt's the world's fastest runner. I'll bet his coach can't outrun him. You know, so I don't know whether I could beat Nate Ritz at chess.
Right.
I really don't. He's pretty stinking good. He's doggone good. But I don't have to beat him at chess, and I'm not going to play him. My job is to teach him and coach him and give him the right guidance and the right attitude and the right tools, and he'll probably go on to be a better chess player than me. And that's great. That's fine with me.
Ro, could you add a couple words to that?
Well, I agree. And as I said, I think the best coaches are the ones who need to be working with the youngest groups. You know, give them the basic material, help them understand it, help them learn to love it. And if they don't have a good start, if they don't have a good base, it's difficult to build up from there. So I would agree.
Awesome. Bruce, did you want to add one thing?
I was just going to say, you know how it is, and it's been this way, you know, over time for, you know, well, thousands of years. You know, the younger generations, they all think that they are much smarter than us. They know everything, you know, and we know nothing. I mean, you just have to admit that, you know, but, you know, so, you know, when it comes to coaching, you know, like I say, you know, education is key. And you know, we do the best we can with the tools we have.
Absolutely. And speaking of tools, my last thought was resources. So we, as fencing coaches, those of us that are fencing coaches, we have Ro to lean on as a resource. And I sent that email out a couple days ago that you can connect with him and get thoughts and mentorship from him. But there's also something that Ro mentioned to me about a year ago, is the Positive Coaching Alliance. Ro, could you tell us a little bit about that guy? I've visited the website, but haven't spent a lot of time.
It's an organization which is dedicated to developing youth sport in the way we've all been talking about for the last 45 minutes. And they're very dedicated to helping to discover best practices for working with children, developing positive coaching. You know, we've all, or probably most of us, have encountered a negative punitive coach, and not being one of those people, but being someone who is able to bring a positive attitude and positive teaching style to youth athletics. And that includes positive parenting. You know, youth sport parents have become a hot topic. And while that is somewhat of a stereotype now, it often holds true. So it's a movement to sort of give youth sports back to the kids, and perhaps de-emphasize winning and more emphasize development, not just of the sport, but of the child.
Are there other resources that anyone would point out to other coaches? Nathan, you've mentioned the book Chess Openings for Kids, and that is a good book. I've enjoyed reading it myself. Are there other resources? Bruce, you made a motion.
Well, I was just wondering, the Positive Coaching Alliance, is that what you said it was, Ro?
Yeah.
Is that, do they have an online presence website?
They do. They have, I don't know the URL off the top of my head. They're also very active on Facebook. They post a lot of good articles.
Yeah, I can just do a search. No big deal. I'll
And I
find it.
believe they do lectures as well.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. Great. Any other resources anybody'd like to share?
Well, for chess, I think Chess Kid is an excellent resource.
That's kid.
I tell my students that they'll improve their chess more if they spend 30 minutes on tactical puzzles than if they were to play a 30-minute chess game. So I think Chess Kid is a really good resource for tactical puzzles.
Good. Yeah, I've enjoyed that website myself, and my kids have as well. So
Yeah, it's just a fun website. That's what I tell all my chess kids. I say, just go there, check it out. It is so much fun. You'll have so much fun. It's just a fun website, fun place to go.
yeah, and I think it makes our jobs easier as coaches a bit because they're getting some reps in between our weekly practices. So
And they get a rating too, so they can
yeah,
see their development climb.
yep.
I utilize fencing.net. They have a pretty good forum there. Sometimes they get lost in the weeds about, which shoes are the best and stuff that, I don't really care that much about. But there's like armory question and answer in there. There's, just fencing discussion. There's a coach's kind of corner. So that one I utilize every once in a while. But my most important tool to me, as cheesy as it sounds, is actually YouTube. When I'm looking for a particular thing, say a new plyometric drill, some type of strength, working on different planks and stuff like that, I may just refer to YouTube, and then next thing you know, there's a wormhole effect of YouTube where you look up fencing, and now all of a sudden you're into, I don't know, you're learning about a barbecue or something, but there's a ton of information there from experts and other youth coaches that are putting this massive amounts of information into these pages. And sometimes it's a sport completely outside of fencing that I pay attention to. It's soccer. And a coach is just talking about, oh, this is why I do this drill. And there's some nugget, there's something that he says or she says. And I'm like, that's transferable. That's something that I can use as a rhetoric piece. It's something I could say to my kids in repetition that help them in fencing, help them in chess, help them in other sports. So YouTube's a huge resource for me.
Awesome. Are there any other final thoughts? I'm at the tail end of my questions and we're over time. So anybody have any final thoughts?
I think it was a good discussion. I like this. We should do this more often.
I agree. It was a good learning experience, and it was fun.
Good.
Yeah,
Well,
the webcams make it more personal too. It's
good.
almost like being in person.
I was just joking to some friends about how I found the perfect career, and being a coach, I get to listen to my own voice so all day long, and this is more that kind of coaching ego stuff that we kind of have to have.
Yeah.
So,
if you love what you do, Kamau, it's not work, it's not a job. If you love what you do.
That's it, right? And so like these kind of conversations is like, I almost get like adrenaline sometimes. I want to say, hey, there's all these things, like coaching's so fun, and these are the things that we do. So I really appreciate you guys and having the opportunity to talk to you all about coaching, because I really do love this stuff. And anytime, like I said, there's, I love Greg Popovich, but I'm never going to get to have a chance to talk to him about youth sports. So when I have people like you in my life where we can talk about these things that we all love, like it's really meaningful stuff.
Yeah, really. Thank you guys for participating today.
You're welcome.
It was fun to be part of the discussion, and thank you for rolling with the questions and rolling with the technology issues right away. And if it seems like this is a good idea to continue, I'll look for an opportunity to do it in the future.
That'd be good.
Sounds good.
Thank
I
you.
hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Thank you very much.
All right. Yeah, thanks. You too. Have a fun day. Have a fun weekend. We'll talk to you all later.
All right. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.